All right. Well, now we are on to fan favorites, rants, and shout outs. So I've told everyone to bring their A game. I assume they have followed those precise instructions. So we will take the same order with Mr. Armstrong. What is your rant and or shout out this week?
Well, mine's a shout out, and it's a little more sobering than normal, for which I apologise. But I can't let this podcast go without talking about what turned out to be last night the worst mass shooting in the UK since 2010. Now, by some country standards, the numbers aren't severe. There were 6 dead, but they included a 3-year-old girl and the assailant himself. But I sort of want to shout out to those who run towards danger rather than from it. This was a tremendous response from the emergency services in this in Plymouth, the part of UK where this happened. 4 air ambulances were almost immediately on station, including, of course, 3 who don't serve the area in question. Within 6 minutes, armed response officers were on scene, and as some of you know, not every police officer in the UK carries weapons, and that's very much a specialist role still. And these people ran towards danger rather than away from it, and they knew that there was a man walking the streets with a shotgun shooting everybody he saw. So it's a shout out to those who ran towards that incident, and thoughts and prayers to those who are still in hospital as a result. And that was going to be my rant over for today. But just as we went on air, Tom, I got an email from a colleague and a friend who is one of those people who runs towards danger. He's a volunteer ambulanceman. And I just wanted to read the email that he just sent about how his year has been. He said, "It's been a pretty hideous year. With so many people isolating, there's been a huge demand on limited resource. COVID was so awful in January to March. I have never had such horrible experiences. People literally dying on me. COVID has thankfully reduced in terms of 999 calls, what you call 911 calls. Those we do go to now are almost universally younger people who have not had the vaccine. So many 30-year-olds who decided they thought it was a hoax are now in intensive care and dying. Pregnant mothers too. We're not out of this yet." So it's a shout out, a somewhat sobering shout out to those who run towards danger, those who give up their time to help out others, and a plea that I think Matt made so eloquently on our last broadcast. If you've not had the vaccine, go out and get it now.
Jonathan Marks.
Well, I don't know if that's pretty tough to follow, but I'll do my best. You're going to have to bear with me because I'm kind of trying to set this up a little bit here. People will come, Ray. They'll come to Iowa for reasons they can't even fathom. They'll turn up your driveway, not knowing for sure what they're doing. They'll arrive at your door as innocent as children, longing for the past. Of course, we won't mind if you look around, you'll say. It's only $20 per person, emphasis added there. You'll pass over the money without even thinking about it, for it is money they have and peace that they lack. And they'll walk out to the bleachers and they'll sit in shirt sleeves on a perfect afternoon, or in this case, an evening. They'll find they have reserved seats somewhere along the baselines where they sat and when they were children and they cheered their heroes. And they'll watch the game. Well, maybe some will, maybe some won't. And it'll be as if they dipped themselves in magic waters. The memories will be so thick, they'll have to brush them away from their faces. Let me tell you something. Major League Baseball, you blew it. You absolutely blew it. And if the executives are listening to this podcast, so I'm going to tell you again, you blew it. You choked. You had a golden opportunity. You had the Yankees playing on the Field of Dreams field that was built, and you had blackout situations where people couldn't watch the games. You know, I read the newspaper articles. I understand, what happens from a TV production perspective. But don't tell me in this day and age you couldn't have figured out some way, somehow, something better to broadcast that game. I don't care who's playing. It was pretty darn nostalgic, and I'm pretty upset that I wasn't able to see it. So thanks, Major League Baseball. You ruined it for me.
Jay Rosen, do you have a shout out and or rant for us today?
Tom, I've got a shout out today, and it's to all the DOJ attorneys, as well as the state AGs who spoke truth to power and kept our fragile democracy from almost being swept away and replaced by a fascist nightmare. Every day, it seems, there are new revelations about horror stories of how the former president desperately tried to hang on to the presidency and steal a second term. While I would have preferred knowing about these treasonous acts in real time, I am awed that we are the beneficiaries of these individuals who decided to risk their reputation and jobs by standing up to the prior administration.
Mary Shirley, do you have a rant and or shout out for us?
Sure. I have both a rant and a shout out. Would you like both at the same time or separately? All right. So my rant is regarding the regression of compliance best practices. With so many newly on the market roles reporting into legal, for so many years, there was a lot of work done, which resulted in compliance departments becoming separate and independent from legal, and compliance being able to report into the board, the CEO, both. However, for some reason, in the last year or so, this is starting to be reversed. The pendulum is swinging back to 10, 20 years ago. And I've got a few issues with this. So I'll list them for you, but I will note that there was a fairly prominent role with an appointed CCO during the last week, and with no disrespect to this individual, again, similar to Francis Townsend, seemingly with no compliance experience, which I think is problematic as it is, but it happens to be a company that has gotten into compliance trouble quite seriously in the past. So the three problems that I see with this is that it's unnecessary risk for the company. I can't think of any other department which so commonly has people saying, oh, why don't we staff this function with someone who's never done it before and put them in the top executive position? Let's do that. No, it only really seems to happen in compliance. The second thing is that it's offensive to the ENC community. For those people who have been practicing for so many years learning their craft, to see a company institute an individual who doesn't have that experience and say, yep, your job is so darn easy, we're going to put someone in the role who's never done it before, and they can hit the ground running because really the work you do doesn't matter and is super simple. And finally, thinking about the morale for compliance teams who are in this situation, there are employees working hard for years to build themselves up, get themselves ready for promotion, and then someone without experience is brought in from the outside just because they're a lawyer. How does that seem fair? What's that going to do for the team morale and employee engagement for those companies? So let's help that pendulum swing back. Do whatever you can to get us back into the point where compliance remains independent from legal, far away from the risks of having to worry about the GC amending your public announcements and that you feel pressured to do so because they're your boss. And then the rave that I have is for the Netherlands, for their newly proposed whistleblower law. Notably, there's no need to report internally first. There's no obligation there. And interestingly, there are a couple of compliance roles. So for companies who have so far avoided getting a compliance function, you know who you are, there is a need for an independent integrity coordinator to receive reports, although I would note that this role can actually be outsourced externally. And then there's also the need for a confidential advisor. So companies that fall subject to this law, if they don't already have an ethics and compliance function in place, they'll need to start preparing to staff those up, ideally with experienced people where you can in the senior roles, and keep an eye out for this bill coming into effect. Thank you.
And I have a shout out. I have a shout out to the governor of the great state of Texas. I could shout out to him for his criminalization of civil disobedience by certain legislators and signing arrest warrants to have him arrested outside the state of Texas and dragged back to the state of Texas. But I'm not going to shout out about that. I could shout out about his refusal to order masks for, and indeed prohibiting the entire government of the state of Texas and every municipality from ordering masks to be worn. But no, I'm not going to shout out about that and his love of personal freedom. What I'm going to shout out about is his fundraising this year. Because what did he do? In the month of May and June, in June, he raised over $4.6 million. There's a special provision which allows fundraising in June in the state of Texas after a legislative session. But what did he do to get this fundraising? This was 50% above what he received in 2015, 15% above what he received in 2017, 30% above what he received in 2019. Did he pass legislation which benefited the citizens of the state of Texas? Actually, no. What he did was prevent any legislation going through to ameliorate and remedy the power outages which came out from the winter storm in Texas. Gas producers got a pass from the governor. Price gougers got a pass from the governor. Out-of-state corporations who made billions off of this failure got a pass. And now making million-dollar contributions in return. As everyone knows, the FCPA prohibits obtaining anything of value. Well, what if you didn't get anything? Can that be a value? Well, in the state of Texas, that's a value. So to Governor Gregg Abbott, good job, Greg.
Hope you'd enjoyed this section of Shoutouts and Rants from episode 84 of Everything Compliance. You can check out the full episode of Everything Compliance, which posts Thursday, August 20th on the Compliance Podcast Network. Thanks for listening.